Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 7, where we're talking about revising and editing. So, I want to mention there is a difference between revising and editing, okay? Revising takes a second look at ideas. Editing takes a second look at technical things. So if you're confused at what I mean by this, so revising means that you are looking at all the content that you've written, all the stuff that's been put forward, and you are looking at ways to reframe those ideas, bring in new ideas, take out ideas. Revising is looking at the concepts that are in your work. We are looking at your examples. We're looking at your assertions. We're looking at your quotes. What we're doing is by revising, we are looking at the ideas that are available. When we are editing, we are looking for things like, oh, you missed a comma here. Oh, you should capitalize this. Oh, you didn't quote this right. It needs to have this formatting. Editing is looking at all the things that your high school English teacher was nitpicky and super specific on and said they're never going to let that pass in college. That's editing. Editing is all the little technical things that I get paid money to look at. Revising is the stuff that I love to look for, and it's the stuff that I actually care about with students in writing. I want to see your ideas are fully fleshed out and make sense. So revising is all about that stuff. And so before we go any further into this, I want to give you a very pro tip, and I do mean this. And it's not just me. It comes from the book. It also comes from like a lot of different like professional writers. Read through your draft before you change anything. If you make changes as you're reading, sometimes it's going to cause problems. Not always, but sometimes it's going to cause problems. What you want to do is read through everything you have. Read through it. Read through that whole draft before you change anything, because sometimes in the moment you're like, I don't like that. I want to take it out. But it's important. Sometimes you think it sounds weird, but it's because in that one paragraph it is, but it makes sense for the rest of it. That's why we say make sure you read through your draft before you change anything, because if you just change as you go, you might make it worse or you might make things confusing. So honestly, read through everything first before you make any revisions or edits. So when we talk about revising, which again, reminder, revising is about the ideas, not the specifics. It's the concepts, the details. When revising, I want you to consider things like this. Content. What is the most important information that is needed? Is it being represented? So if you're going through and you're reading through your essay and one of the most important things you want to talk about is not mentioned until the very end, I would argue it's not being represented. It's not being represented. So now what do? You need to adjust your content to make sure that you are representing that concept that you want to make throughout the essay. So this is why we say, revising is looking at the bigger picture stuff. Organization. When we revise, we want to know, does it flow? Does it have that cohesion? Remember we talked about this last week? We want to make sure that the overall essay flows. We want to make sure that things follow a logical way and that it sounds good. Style. Is it appropriate for your audience and your argument? And perhaps my most favorite question that I like to ask is it you? And I cannot emphasize this enough. Is it you is an important question. You're the one that's writing. If your writing doesn't sound like you, if it doesn't feel like you, then it's not you. And I would argue you shouldn't submit it. It's not you. You should feel some type of pride in what you write. Whether it's the best thing you've written or the worst thing you've written, you should have some pride in it. So, is it you? Is an important question. And yeah, is it appropriate for your audience and argument? Again, what is the most important thing you're trying to say? Who are you trying to tell? If it's appropriate, it's exactly the right thing you want. You don't want to be addressing a bunch of high school students and talking to them like they are marine biologists who have spent the last 40 years in the field. It's not going to work. And perhaps this is a beautiful transition between revising and editing, is readability. Okay? Does it make sense to a random person with no previous knowledge? And this is where I tell you the best thing you can do as a writer who's getting better at writing is have somebody read it. It's why we do peer reviews. It's because you want to get a second set of eyes to look at it. You want someone who does not have previous knowledge of your paper to read it, because then they can actually give you the honest responses of, it doesn't make sense, this felt weird. They can give you that real, raw feedback that will help. So I encourage you all, there's a small video coming about the peer review for this week, but I want to emphasize specifically for all of you. If you have somebody in your household, in your life, a close friend, a family member, whatever, somebody that you can share your essay with and have them read through it, just have them read it. Full stop. Have them read it. Don't ask them to make corrections or anything. Just ask them to read it. And after they read it, ask them what they thought. Ask them, did it make sense? Ask those types of questions, because that's going to give you the best answer for what type of revision do you need to make to the essay. Because if some person has no idea what you're saying and they know you very well, then something about it is not right. It is not you anymore. Does that make sense? I hope it does. So when we revise and edit, I want to mention that your writing should have unity. And what I mean by that is that all of your writing should be towards the same goal. Everything that you put in your essay should be towards making your argument, towards proving your thesis statement. At no point should you have a segment of your writing that does not further that goal. You should not have something that is trying to take away from it. You should always be working towards the goal of, let me tell you why my argument is correct. Your writing should have that unity. And when writing an argumentative essay, which is what this is, it's an argumentative research essay, but it's argumentative, we want to write in active voice. Okay? Active voice versus passive voice. Active voice is you're doing something. Passive voice is something is being done to you. You want to make sure that it's active. And in relation to this and its own thing, language and word choice matters. I know this might seem weird, but it's true. The words you choose matter. Something that I know I talk about in English Comp 1 is how words have meaning, and I'm sure Dr. Robinette does too. So if you've had one of the two of us, you should have heard this at some point in some way, shape, or form. But word choice matters. There are unintended meanings to words. We have connotation and denotation. Connotation is the associated emotional responses to words. They're not actually there, but we put them there. So it's important to note that language and your word choice matters. The words you put on the page make a difference. So be conscious of that. And this one is very specifically for the peer review and for your rough drafts or your working drafts due this week. Just because a peer professor says something doesn't mean you have to change it. Okay? Please hear me out when I say that. Just because a peer or professor says something doesn't mean you have to change it. Any feedback that I give to a student is never a, you have to make this change or you will fail. It is always a, I think this is what's needed. From a reader's perspective, it feels like that's what's missing. Okay? That's where I come from. Outside of the grammatical things. Grammatical things are me saying it should be changed. Content things, the revising stuff I say, is always suggestion. It is not mandatory. And that goes the same for your peers. If they are making revising suggestions, those are just suggestions. You don't have to change it. Editing, those ones might need to be. So oftentimes, if a peer or professor is saying something about your work, this suggests that there is a gap, there's missing information, or there's confusion in what you wrote. It doesn't mean it's bad, it just means there's something missing, okay? So I encourage you, if your peer partner says something about not sure what you mean, or I give feedback that says, I'm unsure what you meant by this statement, it's not saying that you're wrong. It's not saying take it out. It's saying it just means that there's something we're not understanding. You want to make sure that you clarify that, okay? I underlined and bolded this last one because it's the most important in my opinion. Don't throw away or delete content. At least not until you submit the final thing. I've had students who went through peer review who their peer partner said that an entire paragraph of their essay felt out of place and shouldn't be there, so the student took it out of their final draft. They submitted their final draft before they got my feedback on their rough draft, in which I thought that paragraph actually was really good, just needed to be put in a different spot. I gave them that feedback. They already deleted that paragraph, didn't remember what they wrote, and had to rewrite it from memory, and asking if I could show them the rough draft again that they submitted so that they could rewrite that paragraph. Don't throw away or delete content, not until you submit the final draft, because you never know when something actually is important. Just because one person doesn't like it doesn't mean the other person doesn't either. Okay? So, language, because I said, word choice and language matters. Language is not just word choice, the connotation versus denotation that I just talked about briefly. Denotation is the literal meaning of the word. Connotation is the implied meaning of the word. Normally, my example that I use for connotation versus denotation has to do with texting. And I ask every one of my students always, if you get a text message that is a letter K, does it mean okay or does it mean something else? Oftentimes people have some kind of connotation with it. Usually a I'm in trouble, they're mad at me type of thing. So anyway, connotation versus denotation. It's also tone. Casual versus professional. And I know this is definitely going to throw some of you for a loop, but just because you're writing an academic argumentative research essay for me doesn't mean the tone has to be fully professional. There can be a level of casualness in your writing. That happens to be maybe the way you talk. Remember, we want to make sure that what you're writing is you. Is it you? Do you talk a little more casual or a little more professional? Put that into your essay writing. Your tone should be semi-professional because you are writing an essay for a college paper, so it shouldn't be full of, let me tell you about this, full of expletives and things like that. No, it should be professional, but it doesn't have to be verily, and then he said thus. No. Find a nice middle ground. Be you, but be a semi-professional you. Does that make sense? And then style comes down to, research essay is what your style is, so that one doesn't really change much. But it's important to note that language is multiple components. It's not just one thing. So, specific proofreading elements. This comes down to the editing portion, okay? So the things that we look for when we proofread are format, facts, names, spellings, punctuation, and grammar. Format is pretty straightforward. I've provided you example essays and things like that that follow the exact format that you're supposed to do. Formatting, I've talked about before. This is not something that's new. It is literally the idea that your essay is, meets the page requirements. It looks the way it's supposed to. You don't have weird spacing or fonts or anything like that. Everything is just the format that it's supposed to be in, which we've talked about. If you keep it the default font and size, it's fine, but you can change it to any of the normal ones, Arial, Calibri, Times New Roman, whatever it might be. And as long as it's between 11 and 12 point font, we're fine with that. Double spaced. That's the reality. That's the format. When we look for proofreading, we want facts. So we want to make sure that anything that is stated is not just some random one-off opinion. It's actually factual. So anytime, talk about a statistic or something, there's some kind of way to prove that that's true, things like that. When we're proofreading, we want to look for names. Any name that's a proper name should be capitalized. We want to make sure that people are given credit where credit is due, so we're looking for those things. Spelling is straightforward. You want to make sure things are spelled correctly. Punctuation marks are in the logical and correct places. Periods, commas, exclamation marks, question marks, quotation marks, all that stuff. And grammar, the syntax of how a sentence is formed makes sense. That's the proofreading stuff. And honestly, I can't believe I'm saying this, but for the most part, a lot of these things can be done with AI and the spell check function in all the different formats and things. A lot of this stuff gets caught by those. Not everything, but a lot of it does. So it's why I emphasize with peer reviews in particular, and anybody who's had me for other classes know, I'm not looking for your peer review partner to look for this stuff. I'm asking them to look at the bigger picture, the content stuff. I'm asking them to not edit, but revise, help in the revision point. I do ask a little bit of the grammar and punctuation, but that's not the primary thing that I'm looking for. That's my job to find. Well, I mean, both of them is my job to find, but point is, the specific proofreading elements, I ask you to look for them, but I'm not expecting everyone to find everything perfectly. So, I already did talk a little bit about grammar. Grammar is subject-verb agreement, commas, semicolon, colon, punctuation, independent and dependent clauses, tense. It's all of these concepts. This is what grammar is. And so some of these, I'll be honest, I imagine most of these should be familiar to everyone, but I also know that depending on how long it's been since you've been in school, whether or not English is your first language or like your fifth or seventh or 10th language, like all these other things can change how this works. So I'm not assuming that everybody has the same level, but I'm saying these should be familiar things. So subject verb agreement, if you use a singular noun, there should be a singular verb, things like that. It also has to do with tense, which is lower down, but things that happen in the past all happen in the past. Things that are in the present happen in the present. It has to do with that kind of stuff. The bigger one that I see issues with is independent and dependent clauses, and so I do like to talk briefly about them here. An independent clause is a statement that can stand by itself as its own sentence. The cat walks down the hall. That's an independent clause. A dependent clause is an incomplete sentence fragment. It's an incomplete statement that needs more to help make it a complete sentence. So, down the hall is not an independent clause. It's a dependent clause. Down the hall, the cat walks. That's a dependent clause and an independent clause. The cat walks is an independent clause. But if we put down the hall, comma, the cat walks, that creates a complete sentence of both an independent and dependent clause. It's important to note, sentences that are dependent clauses are not complete sentences, and those are the ones that I oftentimes see students writing, and it's the ones that I'm like, okay, where's the subject, where's the verb? This is not a complete sentence. It's why I emphasize that. So, for those of you who are deciding to do a presentation, all good presentations follow a simple format. And I actually did this quite tongue-in-cheek funny because rule number 4, visual is not overly complex or wordy, is exactly what I tried to do here. It's the 7x7 rule. So good presentations follow a simple format where they provide a visual component. When you are presenting, you do not just read the source material or the slides. You actually, engage with the content. You expand on the content. There's more than what's written on the slide. Oftentimes, it's not what your audience sees, but it's something that you've prepared and you've worked on outside of this. Oftentimes, we want to make sure that what is on the slide is just kind of the important notes, the quick and easy things for the audience to remember or to engage with, and oftentimes can be a quick, brief reminder for you of what you are supposed to be saying, especially if you practiced and, read over and you don't need note cards or something. So obviously the third piece should some semblance of eye contact. I tell people all the time, you fake it till you make it. You look around the room, you look straight forward and don't actually make eye contact, but it makes it look like eye contact. Good presentations try to do that. Obviously, with a virtual presentation where you don't have an audience, it's a matter of just occasionally looking at the camera, which is super awkward, and I understand that, but that's the important part of that, to make a semblance of eye contact. Like I said, visual is not overly complex or wordy. It follows that nice 7x7 rule. Note that I made this slide in particular to emphasize this type of visual thing. So the visual itself is, not distracting. The text box does not take away from anything. The information on the slide is not super wordy, because at this point, after everything I've already been saying, and I'm only at rule number 4, most people have already read through everything. So they've already seen what is coming and what I'm going to be talking about. So that's what a good sample presentation component should look like, is not overly complex, things like that. Obviously, signal phrases are important for transitions. You want to make sure that your audience knows when you're talking about something and when you've moved on to the next thing. It's an important aspect of a presentation, not necessarily of a paper, but I would argue a good essay will also have signal phrases, because we want to know when we are transitioning or moving from one idea to the next. Along with my eye contact of fake it till you make it, spoken confidently and with authority. Whenever you are presenting something, and this is advice for not just my class, but any class, speak confidently and like you are the master authority on what you're talking about. Doesn't matter if you aren't. Doesn't matter if you've only prepared this like a day before. Speak confidently like you know exactly what you're talking about, because that confidence plays well into presentations. You want to have that confidence, even if it's fake. It's important. And then last but certainly not least is practice. There shouldn't be a lot of stumbling and that feels to any participant or any person who's in your audience, that makes it feel like you've not practiced a single moment. Having some uhs is okay, but clearly practicing where you know the information. You're able to talk about it at length. You're able to engage with it. You're able to answer questions. That's what people are looking for. And that's what we mean by clearly practiced. You know what you're talking about. You actively can engage with it. And if somebody asks a question, you're often able to answer exactly that question. And so I don't know if you've noticed, but all these slides, look at that. They're all kind of 7x7. And they're all very simple design. Notice nothing really takes away from the writing. All the content has straightforward pieces, and then I've elaborated and talked about each one. This is what a good presentation looks like. I'm not saying this is the best presentation I've ever made. It's definitely not. But it's an important and very simple visual way to show you what a good presentation can look like. That being said, it's party time. And I do mean that because this is it. This is the end of the lectures. So I want to emphasize this. Next week, week 8, there will be a short video. But it won't be a real full lecture. It'll just be a short, engaging conversation about wrapping up the class. You've covered all the content. You've gone through all of this. The next step is the peer review and submitting the essay, and that's it. You've done it. All of you who have kept up to date and turned in your work and have emailed me with questions and all this other stuff, I sincerely thank you. I know you've put in hard work, and I really appreciate that. I really do understand the struggle of doing a summer class online. And those of you who've been doing all the work, I really respect that. I do. I want to thank you. Those of you who have fallen a bit behind, it's okay. You still have time. And I'm still proud of you because you're still working towards it. That's amazing and needs to be celebrated. If you are here at this lecture video and you are still listening and you are still working in this class, I am so proud of you. I really am. We are in the hardest part of the semester right now. It's the end. You got work that needs to be done, and it's coming up quick. So keep up the hard work, and I will see you in the next video.